Welcome to The Naked Podcaster. Get ready to hear stories of someone brave enough to bear it all. Let's get naked. Welcome to The Naked Podcaster. Today I'm here with Matt Zinman. Matt, how are you?
Excellent. How are you doing, Jen?
I'm fine. We pre-gamed, and so we're already having fun. I had to stop having fun to do the podcast so we could have fun on this.
Got it.
Yeah. You are an author of a book that I find very interesting, but because you and I align in so many ways. It's called Z-isms, Insights to Live By, and I love what you're doing. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
For sure. Thank you. Z-isms is really about anybody who have those pearls of wisdom and insights to live by that they've learned over time, that they share with others, all with the goal to positively impact as many people as possible. That's certainly my goal with the book. And it really focuses across self-discovery and mindfulness, and then personal relationships, and then getting into energy and law of attraction and mindfulness and heightening it, but then into life enrichment. So anything having to do, for anyone who wants to create a life enrichment and personal development plan, that's there for them to make it actionable.
I love it. And you're writing this like you're writing it to me. If I'm reading it, I'm assuming You're writing it to me because
Right.
So there you
It's like a personal conversation.
I really, really like this. And then it's your experience positively, which is what this podcast is.
Absolutely.
And
but we're getting to some kind of naked truth here. So I'm wondering
we are
what you have in store for me.
Well, we never know. I never know what you have in store for me any more than you know what's in store for you. Right. So that's the good news. I want to go back in time and talk really, because this book clearly was launched from a passion that's inside you and how you took issues in your life and turned them around in a positive direction. And that's what this podcast is about. So let's go back in time.
Sure. Any particular place you want me to start? I can go.
There was conception and then birth.
Okay. After conception. No, I would say that one of the common threads for me in life has been playing ice hockey. Oh. And I've done it since I was 6-7 years old. And one of the early experiences that really was defining for me was I was on ice with my first clinic, just learning how to stand on blades, and older kids were on the ice, and one of them took a slap shot and hit me in the face. And broke my jaw 3 places. I know, right? My poor mom. Why am I bringing this up? It's because I still play. It was important to me to be able to, after I was done eating through a straw for quite some time, it was important for me to keep going. And it's been, a common thread for me through my life, and the friendships I've made and the experiences I've had. I went to Temple University in Philadelphia, and captain Temple for my junior and senior year, undefeated champion. So, you get that experience of throwing the gloves and sticks everywhere. And I played on Team USA when I was a teen on travel across Europe. And now it's just beer league for me. But I still have some very good friends, and it's just been that common thread for me that has helped me earn respect and the friendships that I've had. So I hadn't really planned on it, but that's really where I wanted to start here today.
I love it. Where did you grow up?
In and around Philadelphia.
Okay. So I grew up in Rhode Island, and when you're in like the New England area, and we don't have accents, I never picked up an accent on you.
I don't have an accent.
I don't either.
It depends. I guess it depends who's listening. So if Australia, if you can hear us,
we have an accent.
We have an accent.
Yes, but that like New England-ish accent you don't have. So my dad actually lived outside of Philadelphia, so I spent time over in that area. I have a Philadelphia Flyers shirt.
Do you?
Yes.
Well, of course, I'm a big Flyers fan. I was born the day the Flyers played their first game.
Oh my gosh.
It's true. Yeah, so I have a common thread with them, and it's probably what inspired me to play. That's when they won the Stanley Cup. That's the last time they won it.
It is all you. You are the reason. Your birth.
You think so?
Well, why not claim it if you can?
I'm not going to take credit. We're going to.
Okay, all right. It is possible. Potentially,
If you say
allegedly.
so, I'm going to
Okay.
go with it. I'm going
Okay.
to go with you. I won't disagree with you now.
So
You're asking all these questions,
hockey's such a big thing in the East Coast.
right?
And a lot of people who like I'm in Nevada, and it's not a big deal.
Not a lot of hockey in the desert.
No, not a lot of hockey in the desert, but it's very competitive. It's super intense. It's really physical. It's hard to get on those good teams. So congratulations. And the
Thanks.
fans go absolutely ballistic.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of what I miss, right? In my younger playing
Yeah.
days, having the, big crowds and faces lining the glass, it's all empty stands for us now, but I love it. And, one of the things, going back to your original question, I'm the youngest of four,
Mhm.
and I'm like 5 years behind my next brother. And so it was mainly me, my parents and I was, my high school days, I was kind of like an only,
Yeah.
everyone was out of the house. And so we moved from the house I grew up in to another area entirely, moved away from all of my friends. And the school I went to, without getting into much detail, was just upside down. I was already going through those adjustments. It was hard. And I wasn't the happiest camper there. And so it was with my friends that I played hockey with that I decided to change high schools, which happened to be um, a Catholic school. So I was raised Jewish. I was the first Jewish kid to go to a Catholic school in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. And I would say that hockey played an important role for me that first year in terms of the adjustment and, the friendships and the gaining of respect at a time when I was up against it in terms of being the first in that regard.
Catholic schools also. I was born in 70. So I'm not sure when you were born, how close we are in age.
67.
Yeah, I thought we were really close in age. So um, big deal in the East Coast. I was like United Methodist, which is not as tough as Jewish. And it was like 99.9% Catholic and Catholic schools. And then there were us, those of us and then the not Catholics.
Right.
What kind
Yeah.
of that was a huge transition.
I was already in transition,
Yeah.
and that's why I guess when you ask that question, and that really seems to be the common thread for me, through my life. It's it's one of the great loves of my life is playing. It's a great outlet for me, and unfortunately, with some of the limitations right now, the rinks are less open, but we still do the virtual happy hour. So
Oh, good.
it's
Well,
not
that's what's important.
it's not a complete loss.
You're on the beer league. The league's done, but the beer's still there.
Right. Yeah,
So
I wasn't really kidding. It is beer league.
That's awesome. But it changes. So I know we're going to talk more about your struggle, but while we're talking about hockey, I want you to tell us, because we all build tools through the struggles and the good times. So you had to have built a tremendous toolbox in playing hockey, from getting a slap shot to the face and breaking your jaw in three places. Were you wired shut?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I bet. I mean, I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
From that, the tough stuff, and the competitive side, and getting on those teams, because you got on those teams, that doesn't mean you're like, yeah, I'm just going to show up and be on this team. You actually, it's not easy to get on these teams. It's pretty competitive. And then the blessing. So what skill sets did you learn in your hockey career? Because it's been like almost your whole life.
Right. That's a really good question.
Friendship was
Certainly
one.
friendships and just the structure and the discipline and, the hard work. I mean, growing up, my summers, I was actually up in Canada training. And so day in and day out, that's where hockey,
Yeah.
that's where you go, at least in the Northern hemisphere.
Yep.
And it was intense, right? Day in and day out, and the drills and the things that go with it. For Team USA, I literally was probably the last walk-on. In fact, I think I was a sub that came in for somebody who couldn't go. So I'm definitely not here saying I was, going to go pro or anything like that, but it was just great experience for me. So those experiences, the traveling, the staying with host families, those are things that just exposed me at a young age, and then throughout, to just gain the skills that that go with them. It's funny, I heard something, and I haven't found the source of this, but somebody had done some kind of research or study that said that of successful people, that they either played an organized sport, which reminds me of why, you're asking the question, or they were in the military, or they took some form of martial art or did something in the discipline of like a yoga or something like that. That there's a very high percentage of that kind of a common thread.
I'm not surprised. I think the structure and the
Sounds
disciplines
true to
here.
me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Just for that structure, and like hours, and not just hours, but really physically difficult and emotionally difficult hours that you're spending hyper focused and trying to get better. I mean, what a great skill for business, right? For life, for anything.
It definitely translates. I mean, the work ethic and things that come with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really good question. I hadn't quite thought of it that way in reflection, but yeah, I think anybody who's been through an organized sport at some level for a number of period of years will look to that as their foundation.
I think also when you push yourself, you have to push yourself physically really in like a lot in that. And I think probably you can come to the realization that like I survived that. I actually have 100% success rate in surviving all my bad days and moments, right? We all do. We get through them one way or the other.
I talk about that a lot myself. You're right.
Oh, yes, we do. 100% success rate. So, but that doesn't mean that they're not really, really hard. But if you can get through some of those things, then maybe other things aren't as difficult.
Right. So, I mean, that's really kind of the foundation of a lot of what I've been talking about lately, which I describe as earned confidence.
Mm.
And so the exact thing that you just described, and, very, very much a meeting of the minds. It's chapter 1, and it's a common thread throughout the conversation. And it's really about staying in the present and recognizing that, look, I've been through everything I've been through and I'm still standing, right?
Yeah.
No matter what that is, we've all been through whatever ringer resonates with our life experiences. And it's easy for people to go in day out and start worrying about things or having anxiety or stressing. And this is kind of a way to outsmart it. Assumptions are another one. And so if you just deal with the real, knowing that's what you've always done, and so it stands to reason you can now and always will, then it's a great way to just ground yourself and remain present, and gratitude has a lot to do with that too.
Oh, yeah, yeah. But we're so aligned. So I talk about with my kids the story you create in your mind. So I think that's kind of what you're relating to. No?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a reminder that I've got this.
Assumptions, yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, you're assumptions. Well, that's we go on assumptions probably the whole time.
Right. But I think I talk about labels. So it's not that other people label us. It's that we do it to ourselves. And that's
right.
Maybe hand in hand with assumptions. And yeah, I know this could be a total tangent.
I think it's like, why be anything other than kind to yourself along these lines? And you might have some kind of a conversation with somebody or, at work, and you're right. You make an assumption, and, maybe you think someone thinks less of you, or you didn't think you said something right. You have a standard and then you start beating yourself up for thinking that you said something wrong or you didn't sound right about it. And why?
Right.
It's for nothing. So, you
Yeah.
made it this far. You don't need to do that kind of thing.
We're going to jump back in.
Sure.
You moved during high school, and that was, Jewish to a Catholic school. Just that.
Right.
Just that's one podcast episode. But you were struggling with other stuff that was going on. Was this,
right.
Did it start before this move, or was that kind of the catalyst to it?
No, it was before. And, you're referring, one of the things that I speak to, and I felt like the personal disclosures were important in having that private, personal conversation, that I've had to contend with depression since my early teens, that preceded, even my high school days. And I definitely didn't have the best gene pool here. So my mom was, suffered from depression. My dad was bipolar. And my brother David in particular also, had it pretty bad. So that is certainly another thing that shapes you, of course, and, experiencing those depths are not anything I wish on anybody. And I've certainly had my challenges with it over the years, not in some time now, but thankfully. But it's also because I try and fold into my lifestyle things I need to do to not let that happen. So it just makes it all the more top of mind. But yeah, I mean, it's chemical and circumstantial. I mean, I've certainly, at this point in life, I think for all of us, we've had our challenges. So
growing up with a dad who was bipolar and a mom who had depression, did you feel like you would have experienced your own depression had that not been the case? Did that play a significant role in your own, or were you separate from that and just coincidental?
I don't know that I can transfer the experience of kind of being in a caretaker role or having
Right.
to adapt to, that feeling of not knowing what kind of state of mind anyone, particularly my dad, is in, if he was coming home from work or something, growing up as a kid. Certainly being exposed to it, didn't make it as foreign. I mean, I kind of, I knew it was going on, but I don't think that it really, when you experience that within yourself, I don't know that your external experience with other people who've been through that, give you much of an advantage.
No, I mean, maybe you'll know what to look for. Do you think you were better at getting help for yourself because you saw it?
Oof.
Or recognize it? Or
I'm trying to think back then. I
these
don't
are
know
the,
if I realized it. I mean, I don't, I'm going back into my early teens here.
yeah, this is 80, mid 80s,
Yeah,
85,
I
85.
mean,
Yeah, like, I mean, I'm talking
anything
80s.
pre-college, takes a little bit of a pause. I don't know that I really could consider myself fully diagnosed or addressing it in any meaningful or structured way until my later teens or even my early 20s, when I was more proactive, or I really just got lower than I ever had experienced up until then. And you don't have a choice. You have to pull yourself out. So but at that point, and certainly knowing back now, I know that I had experienced that at some level. I mean, and I take some of this head on as well. I mean, I look at it from like a mood scale, and it's almost like a thermometer. And you could say, well, here's perfect balance, whatever that is. And then there's a range of normal, and again, whatever that is. But we all kind of know
Yeah.
we have this range of happy and sad. And then what happens when you dip just below, you don't even know it, right? It's kind of like that. It's like that spring feeling, like, oh, it's spring. I feel like myself again. Well, what were you like just last, few months, and you were down a little bit. It's not until you really start sinking. It's like quicksand.
Yeah.
That you have to realize, like, I do this 2 to 3 day rule that I've done this for years now. It's been really helpful to me that I know I'm going to have this day or that day. It could be weather, or punch in the gut. I mean, just, life happening. But if I get to a third day, no matter how hard it is, I really put myself in action. I have to create structure. I have to work out. I look for things to reach out to other people who lift me up. And I want to speak to this here from a practical standpoint for, to have the benefit of this conversation for people who are listening to recognize it for themselves. And, what do you do? And these are coping skills, of course,
Yes.
but, who are the people that lift you up? But it's one thing to talk about it. And you talk about, oh, I really need to get to the gym, that feeling we all have when we're kind of out of that groove. It's that much harder, right? You still have to make yourself do it. But I just don't give myself a choice, because I know what the consequences of not doing it are. And it makes it completely worth making sure that I keep myself feeling well.
What was your low point in depression, and what were the things you did to bridge the gap between back then and now, where, if it's 2 days, you need to be proactive?
Wow. I mean, I've had a number of bouts. I don't
Right.
know that I'd say that, one of the other things that it kind of coincided, with different things that were going on for me. So it was in my mid 20s. I also got some very unexpected and as bad news as it gets with my mom. And so she was off in some way that we didn't quite know for a year or two. And my dad and mom like brought us to like together, for a family gathering with a therapist, and just this family session. And it was like this big reveal, and we kind of knew there was something. But what happened was she had a routine surgery in the early 80s and had tainted blood transfusion and contracted HIV. And, at that time, I mean, the reason for the 2 years, I mean, the stigma was so bad back then. She was literally afraid to tell her own family. I can only, I can't even imagine. And she got the worst of it, right? I mean, there was no cocktail or anything back then. So having to go through those, 10 or 12 years, especially in the last 3 to, how many times it was that we thought we were going to lose her. And you just never prepare yourself for that. You can't ever be fully prepared for that, but just the up and down of it, just from a life management standpoint, aside from having to deal with the clinical depression, those events were certainly very, very low points back then.
Yeah, it didn't help contribute to anything positive at that point. So when did you start realizing you had to do something that more than 2 days, or what did you do? Did you do traditional talk therapy at first? What modality kind of?
I mean, it's been off and on over the years. I mean, I've certainly, had years, and, I think there's this huge stigma. I mean, what am I think there is, right? And it's another reason why I'm more comfortable talking about it. I feel like it is something that needs to be taken head on. And I mean, our brains are part of our body. So why we separate this into a different category from physical health is beyond me. But I really think that either someone individually or someone certainly within their family or close to them, I can believe that. I have a hard time believing that no one's been that close to some kind of mental health event themselves.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right? Wouldn't you agree?
Oh yes.
So, they get it too. And I think that it's very healthy to have a therapist when you need it. Yep. I mean, I haven't, I frankly haven't felt the need for some years now, but I certainly had a straight decade, or, a here or there where that was part of my, part of my health maintenance. And, it's just a different venue where you can get into things that, you don't necessarily need to talk to your friends about. And,
right.
It's right. So yeah, as a modality, that was certainly part of it too.
Yeah. Physical exercise, I know you've said, therapy is always good. Some people use energy work. I did accidentally. And when I realized that's what it was, I was like, oh, I actually kind of like that. So, I mean, we all fall into different things in different ways or search them out. And so that's kind of why I was asking you, what things really helped at that point and got you to this 2-day rule, which is great. Like checking in with yourself. That's bridging a huge gap.
I mean,
which is fantastic.
It's like a habit you have to form. It's like a rule. I mean, look, if I get to the 3rd day, I mean, it's hard. I mean, it's way beyond trying to get to the gym, but you have to just parent yourself. I don't know how else to put it. Like, you will do this.
Yep.
You have no choice. There's nothing like not giving yourself a choice to make you do something. And that's just kind of the rule.
So with your mom with the HIV and her depression, and they were married, they stayed married?
Yeah. Oh, sure.
How did that relationship work with depression and bipolar? Did they have a really good rhythm and system? Because it could be really great and could be really bad.
Well, I mean, her depression also came and went.
Yep.
Certainly in having that affliction, she, over years, it progressed into dementia, which was really, we could watch the same movie with her every day, and right. So he was a good caretaker, my dad. And, at a certain point they moved to Florida because that, she was just it was less likely that she was going to get sick down there.
Yeah.
Right. That's what you want to avoid. You want to avoid crossing over from the immune deficiency to having it advance from getting sick. So that was a big move. And, so I wasn't there all the time because they were there. But yeah, I mean, look, I mean, being bipolar doesn't mean you're off all the time. I mean, my father, certainly there's, had his moments. And I wouldn't exactly say that he was somebody that owned up to it back then either. I mean, it's very evident to us, my brothers, my sister and I, but they stayed together, and I give my dad all the credit in the world, for seeing her through everything. I mean, it was not easy for anybody, and for sickness, and sickness and health, and all of that, he did it.
Awesome. That's awesome. Let's keep moving forward.
Sure.
Because I have bullet points of chronological order. So I have like the cheat sheet. I have the Matt cheat sheet.
Okay.
So let's move forward. The next big issue, I think, is single dad. So
right.
Bridge that gap a little bit.
Yeah, that was a real, I mean, we're talking about 2002.
Okay.
And my son Jake was 2 at the time, and he's 19 now. Obviously, if the math.
You're doing math, yeah.
The math is consistent, and it's I was just talking about vows, and I think that's a really significant segue, because I take them very seriously, and of course, when a child is part of that, that's a huge decision, and for me, his mom and I, in raising him, we have always been really great co-parents. But in living together and just knowing that relationship got to the point, obviously, where the feeling was that needed to happen, my rationale was that I did not want my son growing up in a house that was stressed, and that I could give him a better experience. That was. And I know that was the right decision, quite honestly. I mean, I'm remarried now for a few years, but for the bulk of the time, right till he was 15, it was it was just he and I. And so when you have one, that's also a whole different ball game, right? It's not 18 like some people.
Like some people.
Like some people.
I think one is harder.
Yeah, right. So, but I wouldn't. So in 2002, I mean, my career up until that point, I was in marketing and communication, and I started my own firm in conjunction with that because I needed the flexibility, and also because I actually happened to get a contract, serendipitously, that anchored me to get into that business for the first couple of years, in just that one. And so my life was very compartmentalized. I mean, when I'm with Jake, I'm with Jake. I mean, in those first years, it's, I'm half the time I'm, man in an apartment, diapers and bottles, and then when he's not with me, it's head down and working. I loved it. And then since then, I wouldn't, the freedom, I mean, you talk about like, life values, and I wouldn't say for, by any stretch that it's been easy, on the entrepreneur side. And then, without getting too much on a tangent, I founded a nonprofit, and I've been doing that for the most part the past 15 years. It's kicking and scratching and everything else, but it's so worth it.
I actually wanted to go into the nonprofit. I was excited about the nonprofit.
I wouldn't recommend it.
No, I don't want to go do it. I wanted to talk about yours. I've worked in nonprofits. Yeah. They're really great and really hard. So you started you're crazy. You're like, since I'm moving schools, I'm going to go from Jewish to Catholic. I mean, might as well now. And you're like, I'm getting a divorce. I'll launch a new business.
Well, there is, right. There's a span of years between these.
I know, but you go events, let's go big.
Let's go big. It was more like go necessary. In all those cases. Same thing with the high school decision. It was necessary.
Yeah. But
I was much happier.
Were you much happier once you started your own business?
Yes. Oh, yes. Because, well, for one, I was pretty much on the agency side of marketing communication. So you're rising through the ranks. And then it was my early 30s at the time. And I, got into management. I was director of a department, and I built it up, from just really started it. And I did not like the management side. Like I suddenly was not doing the work I like doing, I was, dealing with personnel issues and, running around without the resources I needed, without very much control over, what I had to do. So it was a challenge. One of the things I will say about those years was that it did teach me to be entrepreneurial. I don't know that I had the entrepreneur bug before I had that experience, and then that the management experience itself gave me the foundation in part for going out on my own. So as much of that was some burnout there, quite honestly, I could certainly look at the positives from it, that made it possible for me to have my freedom.
Yeah, no kidding. It is crazy how things set you up. There's always a story before the story.
Right. I mean, I think that's really where we are, right? With the how all these different kinds of life challenges turn into opportunities and things that are enriching. I've had a much more enriching relationship with my son as a single dad than I would have if I had stayed in that situation.
Hmm.
No doubt about it.
And then moving forward, so you did that, and that was actually a great thing. And well, wait, I want to talk about your nonprofit. It's called the Internship Institute. It's
Right.
still active from 2007,
Right.
13 years,
Yeah.
probably
I actually, yeah.
longer than that like that's when it was launched. There was probably a lot more behind the scenes. Tell me about that and why.
So I started well, a couple of reasons. One is in the marketing business I was in, it's a professional services kind of company. So you're billing by the hour. So, you're limited in your income there to begin with. And then and at that time it was bricks and mortar, right? I was a virtual agency. So we talked bricks and mortar. It was like them versus us, right? It was a whole big thing. Like, oh, well, you want a bricks and mortar because that's the safe thing to do. Um, and so, I took some hits because of being ahead of the curve on the virtual company, and I I I couldn't keep doing that. And I was looking for something different. I mean, I was 15 years into my career at that point, my first career then, and I
Mhm.
always had a common thread around internships. I had 4 internships. The last one led to my first job. I ran all the internship programs for all those employers through those agency years. I just loved it. And I always go back to the school and area schools and talking to the students about the transition and things like that. So when I was at the point of looking to figure out, well, what is this entrepreneurial endeavor? I had these, different ideas. Um, what aligned most with my experience and passion and skill set, and of course a market need. Um, I thought this was the right way to go, and I started it in 2005 and did both at the same time, and realized a couple of things. One is that the whole industry is a frontier. It's still a frontier to this day, for a number of reasons. But I developed all this intellectual property mainly around working with the employers. So when people think Internship Institute and if anyone international hears this, apprenticeships, work experience, right, by any other name, we're setting these programs up and really creating that opportunity pipeline. So I developed the Here You Go set of materials and just add talent kind of thing. And then I developed a whole training program for supervisors and mentors just to really drill down and manage that experience as where it happens. And so I couldn't get the intellectual property evaluated, meaning there was no precedent. So it's not like I could go to an investor, venture capital firm or something and say, well, here's my model and what I can compare it to, right?
Yeah.
So that was somewhat of a barrier. And at the same time, when you're looking at internships, you're talking about economic development, workforce development, some of the things that were in and around grants. And I had the opportunity to get a federal grant, which I did win, and that anchored the nonprofit. So I started in '05, and then '07 founded the nonprofit and have run about $1 million worth of grants since then. It sounds like a lot, but over the years, and
Yeah.
not all that money was for me. I mean, some of it was to pay interns, and then projects and things, and working with one-offs with employers for the most part. Besides that. And those grants have involved disadvantaged youth just the same as college students. I did one for military transition to help vets as they came back into the civilian workforce and things. So it's been a great experience. And, as of right now, I mean, for where we are, I mean, internships are lesser, they're not quite happening as much. And um, I'm still doing projects and training and things, some trainings and things, but I'm I'm really now able and also want to focus on things with the book that, led us to this conversation.
Yeah, which was so fun.
Awesome.
I know.
Are we done?
Nope.
Oh,
It has
okay.
been. It will continue to be. Nope, we're
Oh,
not
okay.
done.
All
I
right.
just love that. So, how is the nonprofit, or is it? Because I'm not seeing you do marketing and advertising, and then you have this nonprofit. Did you just see a skill set and a need and plug it into that with the nonprofit? And grant writing, like that's a whole skill set in and of itself. I did not want to
Right.
ever learn it when I was in the nonprofit world.
No, there's nothing easy about it, and and
No.
and there are a lot of different aspects to even running the grant that are even more
Hmm.
difficult.
Yeah.
Um, I So for one, I mean, I had the skill set that I had just from my front end of my career, and I can't say that, oh, it was completely a set of transferable skills.
Hmm. Hmm.
It was really more the fact that, in let's say for those first few years of my running my marketing firm and communication management, I was running a virtual internship program. So I already had that structure in place, and it was just something that came naturally. I already had a lot of the materials to then build off of into the intellectual property from running my own program. And I realized that the schools weren't doing this. It's a huge blind spot. Schools don't, I mean, we don't have time to get into that
No
tangent, but,
kidding.
it's a total mess. And so at the same time of having a mission on a day to day to try and set up these programs one by one. And I can point back to ones from those early years that started with 2 interns, and they're running 50 interns a year now. So it's like, it's annuities that I know that I was making that impact. And, that really is what makes the difference for me is to do that. Um, but there remains a much bigger systemic vision that I still need some ingredients, that I can't just organically make happen, without other things happening. So it's good for the institute to kind of be marinating over here a little bit more than it has
Yeah.
been, right? So did that answer? Oh, well, I guess the one other part of your question was with the grants. That first grant, I got a fiscal agent.
Uh,
I couldn't, as a fiscal agent, for anyone who might not know, because I didn't know at first, is
right.
basically working with another nonprofit organization that kind of you piggyback off of, where they're the ones that administer the grant from the financial standpoint, and then we're the ones that run the program. So as a startup nonprofit, there's no way I could get, the first grant was 375, right? The government's not going to give me that money without any track record of
Yeah.
administering a federal grant. So that's why you have to do that kind of piggybacking. Um, and that was nice because like then I could focus on doing the doing.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, I kind of wondered. I have enough experience in nonprofit to be like, I don't understand how you did this while you're a single dad and you're running your own business, and you're doing that kind of 50% of the time because you're being a dad too. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's keep moving forward in your life. You were a
Okay.
single dad. You loved it. You got
Uh,
to be a great dad. You have this great relationship with your son. It was sad but worth it. The whole getting divorced thing sometimes is.
yeah, I don't really see it as sad,
Okay.
at least not. I mean, especially being remarried and very happily.
Yeah.
So,
It's a
right.
big difference, huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So move forward after being a single dad, your son was 2, your brother had an issue.
Right. So, my brother David, who's closest to me, as I mentioned, he was the one I was referring to before. He definitely had his bouts with depression, but I think one of the things that compounded that is that he had a work injury. He fell from a high up, whatever he was doing. He was way up on a ladder or some kind of scaffolding, and um, he got very hurt and he had to go on opioids. He had to go on painkillers. And, this is this is probably back around 2010. So I don't know that like the quote unquote opioid crisis was something that was really
Mhm.
prominently, in the public eye. And it's also one of those things like, look, I mean, we all had our own families, and it's not, even though we're
Yep.
close together geographically, it's not like we're always over each other's houses and
Mhm.
things. But Dave definitely was pushing people away. He really was a lot more to himself than my brother Mark or my sister Andrea. And I think that was kind of part of just the behavior that goes with that is you shut the world out. And
Mm-hmm.
he was he was difficult to get to in that way. He was not accessible in conversation, things like that. And we knew that he was deteriorating, but I mean, his wife, and he's got 3 kids. That's kind of his, that's his family unit.
Right.
And in October of 2012, he checked out. So, I mean, he was in a lot of pain, physically and emotionally. And, I think he just couldn't take it anymore, obviously. So,
Yeah. Which is, I mean, yeah, that's one of those horrible things that I don't think you ever make sense of entirely.
you can't. I mean, but I will say, and just to tie the conversation back to some of what we discussed with depression, and people listening here, and I know that people this year in particular have lost their structure. They're more susceptible to this. People are under financial pressure. I really want to speak directly to them, and make sure that if you're feeling like you can't keep yourself safe and you're out of the reaches of your family, that you do get professional help. And no matter how bad you feel, the thing with the depression is like the opposite of rose-colored lenses, right? Everything's gray, and as much as bad as things may be, even back to that whole notion of earned confidence, they won't always be that bad. And of course, that's a lot easier said than certainly felt in that way. But the one silver lining right now is that the access to telehealth is a lot better,
Yes.
right? So instead of that, there's a much bigger barrier. Like, I have to call some doctor, I have to then go to some office, the lie on the couch, stigma. You literally can, there's a lot more access now that if you're feeling that way, it's instantaneous, and just, hop on a Zoom like we are and have somebody take you through an eval, and it's too important. People are counting on you, and people love you, and no matter how bad you feel, that's not even an option. So
It's interesting when you talk to people who have had failed suicide attempts, which is, I talked to somebody who's like, I hate that you say it that way. Well, I mean, there's a suicide attempt and it didn't work for some reason, and you're on the other side of it.
right.
When those people have someone close to them that commit suicide, it's like, oh my gosh, this is what I would have done to everyone around you. You don't think in the heat of that moment, when you just want the pain to end, emotional, physical, both, whatever it is, you can't imagine getting out of that moment. And when you take a step back and you realize how much bigger that impact is from that one moment you're trying to get out of, I think that's astounding when I hear people talk about that.
Right. I mean, they're I mean, they're a survivor, and I think again with those misconceptions, and talking about perception, you can see the exact same circumstance, completely opposite ways. This being the lesser of optimism, and you convince yourself that people would be better off without you, like that you
Mm-hmm.
rationalize that, and you're wrong.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So, you get to the point and you're like, well, the world will be better without me. And, whatever that is, right? However you rationalize that, because you have to
Yep.
get to that point, you're wrong.
Yeah.
That's it. So,
Yeah. And there's a hotline. So call it if you need to.
yeah, exactly.
I do love the new way you can see doctors for every reason. I
Right.
love it. It's so much easier, but especially when you're talking about mental health issues where you need that more of that urgency. I know
Right.
getting my annual exam, it's an annual exam. It's a well checkup, right? I go in, say hi, shake hands, not anymore, but I go in, I say hi to my doctor. She says, go next door and get your blood work taken. I'll see you next year. Here's your mammogram slip. And I leave. And it took before the COVID-19 issue, it took 3 months to get that appointment, and it's been rescheduled twice. Now that is because of kind of the place that we're in, but the first time it was rescheduled, we weren't really there yet. And I'm like,
Hmm.
so it's actually going to be a year and a half or more before now, and that's not super urgent, but it's just crazy how long it takes. And so I love the new way of doing things. Love it. Okay, I want to spend the last 10 minutes or so really diving in. There's so much positivity that you thread through. You took the situations that you had in your experience and you really turned them into something different, which is like my favorite thing to do. You've talked about earned confidence a couple times. Can you dive just a little bit? And I know that this is in your book, so I don't want you to give away trade secrets. I bought your book, by the way.
Oh,
yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you
I'll
much.
rate it.
I'm honored.
If you buy a book
Really.
and you read it, please leave a review. Please, 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 please always leave a review. Okay. So
or see the reviews first. You know, you
yeah.
never know, right? You never know. I mean, I can't really claim that. I mean, in my 20s, maybe my early 30s, I was more into personal development and consuming and reading books. I mean, it's easily been 20 years since I've had the urge to, I have to read this, read that. So when I wrote this book, I didn't have a frame of reference for, what's this person writing or what's that book about?
Yeah.
So, I already knew in having the style of that personal conversation and the disclosures and anecdotes and things that, unique to me, that the book would, be unique, but you just never know, until, for all the things that you discuss. And I'm just really grateful. It's been very well received. And, I'm loving the podcast to have the opportunity to talk about it and these issues, to be able to help people. And that's really the goal. So I don't run a coaching business. I don't, this isn't like a business card book for me. This is, the goal is to get it in everyone's hands and have that impact. So, with earned confidence being at the foundation of it, I think it's a lot to do. I think it's really a lot about outsmarting worry, and how common that is. And, babies are not born worriers. And so how do you work on, unlearning that? And so, and a lot of it happens in our subconscious, and some of the things we were talking about before about making assumptions, the same kind of thing. And what you have to do if you can't catch yourself in the moment is you have to look at the outcome of, I was worried about something and it didn't happen. And then you have to stop and be like, what did I do to myself? What did I do to other people who I expressed this to? Because now you're getting into your energy and your negative energy and the impact of that. And we have a personal responsibility around that, on a number of fronts. But then by reminding yourself that you put yourself through something unnecessarily, it's kind of like that snapping rubber band. The next time, you can more easily catch yourself and say, oh, no, I've got this, whatever's happening. I know I can deal with it, as if I have even a choice, and even if you don't have the answer, we're all survivors, and we're going to find a way, just like we always have. So grounding in gratitude, is a big one. And the other thing I talk about it, and this comes later in the writing, we get into heightening mindfulness and things, and we do talk about the law of attraction, and then beyond that, and then that chapter being more of a education chapter, it comes down to like what we expect tends to happen. Like that's kind of the summation of the law of attraction. And so if you believe in the law of attraction and you're somebody who worries, then you're contradicting yourself, because worrying is about having an expectation of something you don't want to happen. So that, in fact, it's possible that by worrying, you couldn't be contributing to causing the very thing that you don't want to happen. So, I mean, I know that's maybe seems like a stretch, but hey, if it's there, it's true. So I throw that in.
The most interesting thing about manifestation, because you're kind of talking about manifestation, and I don't think you can just be like, I want $1 million and it's in your account. It's not like that. But the best advice I got to positively manifest in your life is to you imagine the end result, and you sit and you think, this is what it would feel like.
Yes.
Where
you have to step into it. You have to step into it. Right.
Okay, so of course it makes sense on the opposite side that if you're feeling the stress and the I don't want it to happen and the fear and the worry and the, that you're manifesting that too, because you tend to attract what you're
Right.
really feeling.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I claim no originality whatsoever about the law of attraction. I mean, I'm just
No,
kind of
I love it
like
though.
putting it there, but basically, you're reflecting it very well, and it's what our lives are basically a cumulative reflection of all of that alignment and all that energy.
Yeah.
And right, where it's kind of an energy. It's quantum physics based. I mean, there's a lot of science behind it. I'm the last person to also explain quantum physics, but I think people who listen to you probably are more inclined to be into this and already know about it.
I was able to really accept the thought of energy work, because when you come from a religious background, that they don't really match that much.
Right.
And I thought it was fascinating, but I really did when I had a friend and I just said, look, I love what you're doing, but I don't get it. And she was like, oh, that's easy. It's just physics. I don't remember the answer she gave me. I asked her every question that I could think of. But what I can tell you is that once she just described everything and it was scientific based, I was like, oh, now I can accept it.
Well, I mean, look, everybody, it's a
We're all
belief
different.
system issue. I
Yes, it
mean, you
is.
can have to take a little bit of a leap of faith. And look, it's
Yep.
hard to maintain. I mean, you can't
Yeah.
live your day in and out with the demands of it, be like, all law of attraction. You have to be able to fold gratitude as triggers throughout your day, in order to kind of stay in that flow. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, we're all different, but that's how I had to. And now I'm like, my husband's like, you are becoming woo-woo. I'm like, I know, isn't it great? It's science, it's physics. I love it, but I'm not quite woo-woo. I'm not that far, but yeah.
I mean, something like this is more of a personal experience, and
It is.
it has less to do, I mean, at least initially, with, oh, I'm going to manifest this, I'm going to manifest that. And look, it certainly a lot of limits to it. And I do address that. It's, you can't manifest something effortful. I mean,
Yeah.
a book doesn't write itself, a business doesn't start itself.
What?
Right.
I'm so
So,
mad now.
how do you combine those kinds of things is really what I enjoy getting into later on. But at the front end of that, even just, again, it's a lot about being rooted in gratitude. That's when you get that feeling of swimming with the current and being in the flow and just things going your way and starting to experience more coincidences and those. So that's a personal experience.
Yeah.
So only an individual who starts working at that the same as they would anything to experience the effect of that effort will then gain a greater confidence in doing it more by that happening.
I love it. So I want to ask you about something else, because when I saw it, I was like, he like knows
I
stuff
thought you
about
hit all
me.
the tough questions. Okay.
I want
Fire
to talk
away.
about, okay, I want to talk about making coincidences matter, because you use the example of 1111. I was like, I see ones everywhere. So I want to make sure that it is what I'm assuming it is, because you know what assumptions can mean. And I know we've talked a little bit about
So
coincidence,
I
but
have I have an active example of making coincidences matter.
okay.
And then and so that's, I guess that would be chapter 10, and 1111 of course is chapter 11, right? And that's just an expression of 1111 is kind of a part of that experience of being in the flow and synchronicity and a trigger for gratitude. And kids make wishes, or it's what you
Yeah,
make
yeah,
of it, right?
right.
Now coincidences are, again, a very unique experience, and how people you know decide that something is or isn't, or in the aftermath of one being it. I'm talking about making it matter, making it meaningful. So I was so last week, we have a few minutes
Okay.
here, I hope.
Oh yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's going to take a bit.
I
So
thought this would be super positive, so I wanted to.
it is super
Yes,
positive. It's very positive.
yes.
But I don't have the full answer yet because it's in the middle
Okay,
of it.
all right. I like that.
So last week I was on another podcast, and in the aftermath and just getting to know each other, we somehow got in the conversation of them suggesting that I might consider starting a podcast myself. And
Okay.
I thought, okay, that's interesting. I hadn't really quite considered it, but Sure. And I've been thinking about it since. And then a few days later, I was talking to somebody, networking, but podcast related in Australia. And she said, oh, well, there's this course that's happening next week that, I'll ask if you can join. So she did. And I was, invited in, and I signed up. And, as part of that, they're like, well, come to our Facebook page and introduce yourself and everything else. So rewinding a half step, and I'm just like getting used to social media more, and I'm a little old school in that way, but like I have a hashtag that I decided is be the difference. So if you go on my LinkedIn or some of my things, my hashtag is be the difference. And I really have hardly seen anyone using it now that I've said it. Like, what's going to happen, right? So I go to this Facebook page to just introduce myself to this group that's going to be in this podcast, and it's hashtag be the difference movement. Same hashtag. I did not find this through social media. I found this randomly. Like another human being on Earth is using this hashtag. And it just so happens that it came from my getting in a conversation with the person in Australia who recommended me this course I have yet to take. And this woman who's claims to be the podcasting queen of podcasting, something along those lines is her.
Okay.
And so naturally, I'm going to be going through this course next week. There's something very strong. I think that's a pretty strong coincidence. In terms of math, math.
Yeah.
I've had more stronger ones than that, but it's up there. So, okay. So I'm definitely wide-eyed about what this is and taking it seriously and getting to know this person in particular.
So it's
I'll circle back and let you know what happens.
I mean, holy cow.
Right?
But I know
it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. And we all come to these. I always think if I hear about something, let me start 7 more times. If I hear about something more than once, if it's a second or a third time that I hear something or someone says something, someone can say something once, like you should start a podcast, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm thinking about it. And then when you have something else that reinforces that, I'm like, okay, so somehow I need to listen to this or take action or look deeper, dive more deeply.
Right.
And
of course.
that's how books get written and podcasts get started and businesses get
and people meet or reconnect. And you're right. And there are, there's a spectrum, naturally with a coincidence. And a lot of people talk about the things happen, the third thing in short succession. I really should kind of follow.
I think it's 3. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, there's something to it for sure. It's definitely part of being in the flow and synchronicity. But I think the more significant coincidences happen when you are in a conversation, typically with someone who you don't know very well, typically when you go off on a tangent, having a conversation you had no business having, that leads to something much more mathematically unusual in my experience. So that's all that's my experience. And this is an example of that for me. So now, one of the things I say, well, keep a coincidence journal, And then the other thing is, well, okay, there's this coincidence, and then I decide to follow through. So then there's the debate of, oh, I followed through and this happened. Well, was it a coincidence in the first place, or it only happened because I decided to follow through? Does it matter?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's like, it's to each their own, whatever, go for it or ignore it.
Yeah, no kidding. Matt, I have loved talking to you today. Thank you so much for being on and for sharing all of your story and all of your insight. I appreciate it. Everything will be in the show notes. And if we have anything to add before the release, I will make sure that it's there also. But
Wonderful.
I'm really grateful that you were here. Tell me about where people can find the book. I'm going to put the link in the show notes. Tell me about it. Show me it.
Awesome. Well, the link in the show notes, Z or Z, however you pronounce that letter, -isms.com. There's some free resources there. There's the front end sample of the book is there. And, the same thing's on Amazon, and people can read the reviews. And my hope is that they'll have enough interest just to read the first part for free. And if they'll know if they want to keep reading on. And my goal is to have that impact, and hopefully people who decide to get it, experience that.
I know
Thank
we've
you.
touched on like barely anything in the book, but I really appreciate what you've shared. Can you hold it up and show me? Because I love seeing it. It makes me super
Sure.
proud. Yeah.
Does
Yay!
that come through? It's kind of like the lighting.
There we go. There we go. There we go. It's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Now people will know what to recognize. Thank you
Perfect.
again so much for being on.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.